This is the lecture for European history for Friday, the 13th, the 12th of February, 2021. Where we left things off, old King Wilhelm I, Hohenzollern, had gotten Otto von Bismarck to carry some of the burden of being a king for him. And that burden was it took the form of Bismarck interposing himself between the king and everyone else, including his son Friedrich. Everyone who wanted to deal with the king had to work through Bismarck. And everything the king wanted to order anyone else to do, he had to make that order through Bismarck. So Bismarck became the interpreter of the king's will, and he became the indispensable man. So this is basically rulership over Prussia in the name of the king that Bismarck has achieved. And Bismarck knows how to use power. So he takes the advantages of the Prussian state, which include the first general staff in the world, a war planning agency within the army that does nothing but war planning, detailed war planning, so that warfare for Prussia from this time is not an improvised affair, but is in fact something that is professionally planned down to the last iota. And the field commander's job is to adapt the battle plan to changing circumstances, and if necessary, to change the battle plan completely. But instead of starting out with nothing, the field commander starts out with a very detailed battle plan that already has his troops moving. So that is one advantage. Another advantage is the Ruhr, an industrial region in the western region south of Hanover, controlled by Prussia, north of the Rhineland. And this area of hills is filled with coal and iron ore, and it becomes filled with factories, including the Krupp's steelworks. And the city of Essen is like Germany's industrial heart, and not just Prussia's industrial heart, not just Germany's industrial heart. It's continental Europe's industrial heart between England and Russia. Nowhere is as industrialized as the Ruhr, and Prussia has it. And it has Krupp steel. Prussia has the Dreyse needle gun, which is the progenitor of the bolt-action rifle, which allows Prussian soldiers to fire with rapidity. It's called a needle gun, both because of the needle in its trigger housing and because the bullet is fairly small. And there is the culture of Prussia, which makes Prussia as close to being the modern Sparta as anything. A country oriented towards its army, a country where the army comes first. That is Prussia. And there is a cult or a culture of supporting the military, which is an extraordinarily central thing in Prussian society, to the extent that when people stand up, it's not for a lady entering a room, it is for a military officer entering the room. And you saw that parade that we played. So how is Bismarck going to use this power? Well, it is not by speeches and by majority decisions that the great issues of our time will be decided, Bismarck says, but by Eisen und Blut, by Blut und Eisen, by blood and iron. So he's going to make it so. His first stop is Denmark. Denmark is the southernmost of the Scandinavian countries. It is primarily on the Jutland Peninsula, north of Germany, and this island here, where Copenhagen is, and facing it across the Skagerrak, or the strait, the strait between Denmark, Sweden, and Norway, are Sweden and Norway. Denmark has historically controlled the provinces of Schleswig and Holstein. Schleswig to the north, Holstein to the south. But these are also German culturally. In a time of pan-national kingdoms, That's no big deal. In fact, at this time, German minorities live all over Europe, including deep into Russia near the Volga River. They're called Volga Germans. They're gone now. But Bismarck creates an incident. And that incident is not going to be solved peacefully. It's going to be solved by war, but not just between Prussia and Denmark. The Danish War, which is not about tasty breakfast pastries, is in fact going to involve an Austro-Prussian alliance against Denmark. Yes, Austria is drawn in, and the Austrians have enough allies that they're able to bring an army up to help Prussia. So Austria and Prussia in the Danish War of 1864, which I suppose I should write, the years of these wars, 1864, 1866, and that's 1870 to 71. Okay. In 1864, the Austro-Prussian alliance takes Denmark to school in war. And the result is that the provinces of Schleswig and Holstein are taken away from Denmark. But here's where brilliance is demonstrated by Bismarck. Because Bismarck has a long-term goal in mind. His long-term goal, a bit like the Count de Cavour's in Italy, is to unify a Klein Deutschland Germany under the House of Hohenzollern, which rules Prussia. Bismarck wants to achieve this through war. So, he beats Denmark. Now, Holstein is south of Schleswig. And logically, since there's contiguous territory with Prussia, Holstein should go to Prussia. If Austria is to get any of the land, it should be up here in Schleswig. It doesn't really matter. Both of these provinces are way far away from the Austrian heartland. But that is not what Bismarck does. Bismarck arranges it so that Austria gets Holstein, the southernmost of the two, and Prussia gets Schleswig. So every Prussian who wants to go from Prussia in the west to Schleswig, which is also now part of Prussia, has to go through Austrian Holstein. How is this brilliant? Because Bismarck wants a Kleindeutschland Germany without Austria. So his next step after getting Austria to play into a war with Denmark on Prussia's side is to get Austria out. Now, Bismarck doesn't have this all planned in advance. Bismarck has a long-term goal, and he's an opportunist. He sees situations come up that will help him towards that goal. You don't need a brilliant super genius to have a conspiracy work. All you need are sufficient people with a common, clear goal of what they want to change. And if they're in positions to influence things, they will wait for opportunities to arise that give them a chance to further their agenda, to move closer towards their goal. And that's what Bismarck does. But he creates a situation that's going to be easy for him to exploit. Suddenly, Prussian newspapers start talking about Austrian insults and Austrian brutality. Prussian women are searched naughtily by Austrian border guards because Austria is not part of the Zollverein. Prussian men are beaten. Prussian children watch their parents beaten, and they themselves are kicked around by brutal Austrian thugs. Incident after incident after incident is created in the press by Bismarck. Were they based on real events? If they were exaggerated out of all proportion. Because what Bismarck wants is he wants a pretext. And the Austrians give it to him by not being slavish about apologizing for events that are barely real. But in the Prussian press, the people have been worked up into a war fever. So Austrian Naughtiness. Naughtiness in Holstein is the pretext for the 1866 Seven Weeks' War. And in the 7 Weeks' War, Prussia is going to move against Austria. And the rest of the northern German states are looking on because Prussia is bringing them closer and closer. Now, it's not called the 7 Weeks' War because it lasts a very long time. As wars go, 7 weeks is very, very brief. So what happens? Well, the Austrian army marshals itself near the Saxon border, and the Prussian army marches in. At Zadawa, or Königgrätz, depending upon which side you're on, they're both villages in the area of Bohemia where the battle takes place. The main Austrian force is met and defeated by the main Prussian force. I mean, really, it's a blowout for Prussia. Prussia crushes the Austrian army. Now, at this point, there's nothing standing between the Prussian army and Vienna, the capital of Austria. In fact, Prussian generals and noblemen are already getting their pens out to redraw the map and claim some Austrian territory that will make Prussia larger. To which Bismarck says, absolutely not. We are not going to march on Vienna. We are not going to have a victory parade through Vienna. We are not going to humiliate the Habsburg Emperor Franz Joseph. We are not going to take territory, and we are not going to ask for an indemnity. All we want, Bismarck insists, all we want is for Prussia to have supremacy in the rest of Germany. So Austria only need, as their condition of defeat in the war, they only need agree to, from this moment, stay out of the affairs of the rest of the German states. Austria can focus on its empire in the east and in the south, which is what it really wants to do anyway. Now, the generals, including von Moltke, who's the head of the general staff, and the noblemen are saying, but why would we fight a war without having a victory parade and without taking territory? That's what we're supposed to get. And Bismarck says, you don't understand. This is not a normal war. Our goal is not to rape Austria. Our goal is to get Austria out of our affairs. And if we are too harsh with them, they're going to hate us. And that hatred will come back to bite us at an inconvenient moment. What we want is the long-term friendship of Austria. To which the generals and aristocrats go, huh? But Bismarck has the king's ear, so Bismarck has his way. At the end of the 7 Weeks' War, the only territory that goes to Prussia is Holstein, which the Austrians don't really care that much about anyway. No primary Austrian territory is taken. No indemnity, no money changes hands from the defeated party to the victorious party. There's no humiliation. There is no messing with the Austrians. They are treated very gently, and they appreciate that. Because when you lose a war, you're sort of at the victor's mercy. But Bismarck gets what he wants. With Austria out of the picture, the minor German states north of Frankfurt, north of the Main River, join with Prussia in a defense alliance called the North German Confederation. This is a bit like militarizing the Zollverein. It's basically the same territory. Zollverein was a North German customs union. The North German Confederation is basically the same area, but now it's all involved in a defense alliance. What is a defense alliance? Well, if an outside party attacks one of us, we all go to war with that outside party. It is a defensive alliance. It is not an alliance for attack. It says an attack on one is an attack on all. The United States, for example, has alliances like that with countries all over the world. countries in Europe through the NATO alliance, and in the Pacific through individual treaties. So the North German states all agree that if anyone is attacked, they will all go to war under Prussian command. That's key. Under Prussian command. So Bismarck gets clarified their respective roles. And since the reality of the situation is the Prussians have the best army probably in Europe at that time, except man for the much smaller English army, the British army, the minor German states are fortunate to come under Prussian command. Okay. Germany is still not unified. There are still independent states in North Germany, and in South Germany, Bavaria and Baden and Württemberg and these other states here continue to flirt with France. And France wants South Germany as an ally against a potential unification of the north of Germany. But because Bismarck does not humiliate the Austrians are going to stay out of these future conflicts. Had he humiliated them, there's no question that Austria would have joined with France in peeling the southern German areas away from Prussia, because there are religious differences, Catholic versus Protestant, Catholic in the south, Protestants in the north, and cultural differences of all kinds. Bismarck has a defense alliance with northern Germany, and Austria is out, and therefore the French have a weaker game to play in trying to peel Baden and Bavaria and Württemberg and the rest of southern Germany away from Prussia. Now Bismarck has to deal with France. And in dealing with France, he believes that he will coalesce much, or maybe all, of the Klein-Deutschland model of Germany. Here's how. He exploits a situation. The King of Spain dies. When the King of Spain dies, he dies intestate. What that means is he dies without an heir. The Kingdom of Spain needs a new king. The Spanish go to Prussia. Now, this isn't that uncommon. Because of all these little microstates in Germany, for centuries, when people have wanted marriage alliances in England, in Scotland, even a little bit in Ireland, certainly in France and Austria, and eastward in Russia and up in Scandinavia, even as far away as Greece, people go to Germany to get their aristocrats. There are just so many of them. Because there are so many different countries, aristocrats are relatively more common in Germany than almost anywhere else. So the Kingdom of Spain sends a delegation to Berlin asking King William, which is really asking Bismarck, will you please find a suitable Hohenzollern candidate? The Hohenzollerns ruled Prussia. So the Spaniards want a German king, a Hohenzollern king, and Bismarck and Wilhelm say, we'll consider it. But Bismarck sees an opportunity here. Because Spain is south of France, and Prussia controls border territory with France in the Rhineland. He's an opportunist, Bismarck is. When Bismarck leaks information about this to the French, Napoleon III, people of Paris, and the people of France in general become apoplectic, enraged, out of control. How dare Prussia consider putting a king on the throne of Spain, which will surround France with sausage-eating Prussians in Spain and in Prussia and Germany in general. How dare Prussia think this is in any way acceptable? So, Napoleon's government, Napoleon III's government, is going to send a message to the King of Prussia, who is at the spa at Ems, taking the waters. Now, people in the late 19th century, with their understanding of health and medicine, thought that immersing yourself in sulfurous mineral water, which stinks, hot natural spring mineral water, which is very hot and tingly and mineral rich and stinky, drinking that stuff to the point where your entire system flushes out, was the best thing ever for your health. People did it here in the United States. In fact, the guy Kellogg, who eventually establishes the American Cereal Company, runs a spa in upstate New York at a place called Wellsville, where people take the cure, which means that they are bathing and drinking and eating nothing but fresh grains and fresh fruits, all to cleanse their system of poisons, and if they're not feeling well, feel better. This is something the rich do. King of Prussia is rich, so he is taking the waters, as they say, at the spa at Ems in the Rhineland. So the message from Napoleon arrives, and it says, in rather impertinent tones, that France strongly recommends that Prussia withdraw any thought of a candidate from the Hohenzollern clan to become King of Spain, number one. Number two, never again should Prussia even consider accepting such an arrangement, because on its face, it is destabilizing to Western Europe's political and military balance, and it is offensive to France. Now, normally, rulers don't speak to other rulers that way. And King Wilhelm, though old, though taking in the waters, is not happy about this. He's not happy about the tone. But he's also a reasonable man. So he says, okay. His answer is to agree. Because is it worth a war? King Wilhelm doesn't think so. And on some level, Wilhelm does appreciate the French fear of being surrounded by enemies. So, he writes a response. But remember, everything goes through Bismarck. What Bismarck does is he takes the text of the French telegram and the text of Wilhelm's response, and he heavily edits Wilhelm's response so that it is in the same impertinent, imperious tone as the French message. And he also heightens the intent, the impertinent and imperious tone of the French message. From Ems, he sends these altered telegrams, not only to the French government, but also to the Prussian and French newspapers. Before Napoleon has a chance to even see them, the newspapers in Paris are saying, we have been insulted, our national honor is at stake, we must go to war over this insult from the Ems telegram, which Bismarck set up to provoke the French into having an emotional reaction that would lead to war on Bismarck's terms. Napoleon III, who was never one to stand up to his own people, agrees. France has a big army. They actually have a better rifle now than the Drey's needle gun. It's called a chassepot. And the chassepot is a bigger bolt-action rifle with a bigger bullet, longer range. They also have the Militareuse. And the Militareuse, imagine a big barreled Gatling gun, but instead of a spinning chamber with barrels, you have like 25 barrels all parallel to one another. And you fire it like an artillery piece, and it just spits out bullets like a super shotgun, so that everything in front of it is going to be killed. It's like a combination shotgun and machine gun. So Napoleon III, who spent a lot on his army, and who's Napoleon after all, he thinks it's a fair bet that France will accord itself well in the war. But because France declares war on Prussia, which is what Bismarck wanted, the alliance of the North German Confederation is triggered. An attack on one is an attack on all. So suddenly the minor states of North Germany have their militaries under Prussian command on day one, and they're at war. And they want to be, because they think the French are being truly obnoxious. Again, Bismarck's work. Now everyone's eyes turn to the south of Germany. Just because the North German Confederation is choosing to fight the French because the French are attacking Prussia doesn't mean that Bavaria, Baden-Württemberg, and the rest have to join in. If the South German states remain neutral, France has an even better chance of doing well in this war, which starts in 1870. However, Bismarck has also been working on King Ludwig the Mad of Bavaria, and he ain't called Ludwig the Mad for nothing, and on the other South German states. It's not a guarantee, but Bismarck is absolutely thrilled when Baden-Württemberg, Bavaria, and the rest of South Germany joins in solidarity with the North German Confederation and arms themselves for war. So Bismarck has now all of Germany except the Austrians, all of Klein-Deutschland Germany at war with France under some form of Prussian command. The two armies meet on the frontiers, but because of the general staff and because of the early railroads and the general staff's understanding of how to use railroads in war, the Prussians begin to move deeper into France. Now here at Sedan, the French army has gathered. So the Prussians move through the mountains of the Vosges in Alsace-Lorraine, and they surround the main French army under Marshal MacMahon of the French. Napoleon III is also at Sedan. So the Prussian armies surround the French armies at Sedan and besiege them. Meanwhile, in Paris, Napoleon is overthrown, Napoleon III, and a new French republic is declared. But that's not all! Because in Paris, the Paris mob, for the first time really since Napoleon I's whiff of grape shot, take over the city. This is called the Paris Commune. These communards are communists. They're French communists. They're not Russian Marxists, but they're generally communitarian utopians who want to build a new society in Paris. So the French Republic's going to rule the countryside, and the Paris Commune is going to rule Paris, and the Emperor Napoleon and his army are still there at Sedan, surrounded by the Germans. Soon, Napoleon III surrenders to the German army. And there's a famous picture of Napoleon in a physical pose of defeat, sitting next to Bismarck in a carriage who looks like Cock of the Walk, just so proud and happy, and don't worry, little Napoleon, all will be well. Once the emperor and his army at Sedan surrender, the Germans then march on Paris, and they do the same thing. They defeat any army between them. There aren't many. They surround Paris, and they begin to besiege it. Paris has walls at this time. They begin to besiege Paris. The Paris Commune fights them hard, harder than the Imperial Army ever did. The Republic's armies around the edges are kept away from Paris by the Germans. It is in early 1871, as Paris is being shelled, before the Commune is defeated, before the French Republic surrenders, that an event happens which requires its own painting and a description of that painting. Let's see if I can do this without destroying anything.